I'm going to be your host for the panel today with these three amazing experts. And I'm a runner myself. I'm actually training for the London Marathon. So recovery is something that I'm very interested in at the moment. And I hope all of you guys are interested in that too. My mum constantly tells me that I'm burning the candle at both ends. So I think I need to take a leaf out of recovery book and just learn how to really reset. But we've got Io, Sam and Jess here today. So really excited to hear from them. So first of all, it'd be great if you could all give me a quick fire introduction to who you are, what you do, and what recovery means to you.
Okay, I'm up first. So my name is Jessica Dwyer. I'm a functional medicine practitioner and clinical nutritionist. Recovery means a lot to me. I am like a broken record when it comes to recovery for any athlete that's a client, a high performer, or even the people in my life. So I'm going to just drop it now and say oxidative stress. And we're going to talk about that and come back to that. But that's what recovery means to me. And we will spend some time there, I'm sure.
Nice, thanks, Jess.
Nice. Hi everyone. How's everyone doing?
Good.
Oh, energy is quite low. Gosh, that's not what I signed up for. Afternoon everyone, I'm Io. I'm head coach at Adidas Runners London. We're a global running community, and outside of that, I'm a world athletic agent. So I represent a number of elite athletes based here in London. What recovery means to me, again, like Sam said, it's quite wide. But for me, basically, is mental as well as physical recovery. So it's not only the physical part, but it's actually your mind. So your mind is that engine. So how do you actually recover that as well?
Nice, thanks, Simon.
Hi guys, Sam. I'm a sports therapist. I'm also a founder of Save Our Souls, a foot care brand, which I've got to stand outside to make sure you all drop in and say hi to the guys there. My take on recovery is it's very specific to you as an individual. So there's a base that I think everyone should be kind of hitting, and they're like our kind of simple recovery strategies. And then depending on your goals as a person, as an athlete, then we can kind of start to add and drip in other modalities into that. So a bit more of a holistic approach to recovery.
Cool, thanks. Right, so let's dive in. Sam, we'll stay with you, seeing as you're on the end there. So recovery is often overlooked, but why is it so critical for athletic performance and overall health?
So I think we look at recovery, or we look at performance first. So we're very performance driven, whether it be training for something, a match day competition or a marathon day. So sometimes it's not looking at kind of like recovery as a negative, it's a way that we can like really optimize our performance. So again, it kind of brings us back to someone's specific lifestyle and goals and how valuable kind of like training and performance is to them. And kind of adding it in as much as you can. So I work a lot with professional football players. They're working with kind of coaches, physios, doctors, sports medicine doctors day in, day out. So a lot of the stuff that they're doing is just done for them every day. So it's not something that they have to kind of consciously think about. And then anything else they want to add into that, then they can do that kind of pretty easily because they have a lot of time. Financially, if they want anything done privately, it of course becomes slightly easier for them. So I think it's really important that everyone optimise recovery, to their means, and that filters all the way down to general population and kind of grassroots level.
Nice, thanks. Did anyone else want to come in on why you think recovery is often overlooked?
So I see a lot of, I call them working athletes. They're holding down a full-time job and they're training for something outside of work. And if you look at professional athletes, they schedule recovery as part of the work. That's their mindset. That's the way it's programmed. The recovery is part of the work. But with the working athlete, they see recovery as time not filled training. And that's really important to reprogram that mindset because the recovery is part of the work. That helps you with muscle repair. It helps to lower, coming back to what's called oxidative stress. Like what you said, burning the candle at both ends, that can lead into oxidation And when there's oxidation, that leads to injury, damage when we're thinking about the physical body. So we've got to kind of look at scheduling recovery as part of the work, and that is just as important as getting up and pushing yourself to do a run that maybe you actually needed to recover that day.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I can appreciate a lot of that. And Ayo, what are the most common mistakes that people make when it comes to recovery?
Focusing on the 1%. So a lot of the athletes I work with, they focus on the boring stuff. So the stuff that's not fancy on Instagram, the sleep, the nutrition, the active recovery. So when we mean like focusing on it, like you've probably seen that meme of an iceberg, and the 1% is at the top of the fancy stuff and the 99% is at the bottom. So the athletes I work with, they're focusing on that 99%. So if you're not focusing on that 99%, what is the point in doing all the fancy stuff? So that's one thing people overlook. Sorry everyone if I'm speaking like this. I had my tooth taken out on Wednesday. It's like I've trained for a marathon and it's just quite painful. So yeah, but I'll be fine. I need to recover.
Thank you so much for coming out today and sharing your wise words with us. And you all work with athletes, but what are some key recovery lessons that we can take from elite performers? Maybe starting with you, Sam.
Yeah, so I think touching it there, it's kind of doing like the basics really well. It's the boring things that they do every day that isn't so glamorous for social media, for people to watch every day. But that is what they're doing day in, day out. And then I think once you get to that kind of like really high level, it's any little marginal gain that you can get. So as I say, like the foundations, but nutrition, sleep, hydration, physical output, they're always going to be there for professional athletes. And then it's any extra little marginal gain they can get. So you start adding in any other recovery tool, whether soft tissue, cryotherapy, compression therapy. It's really important to these guys and girls. They have access to it every day. And sometimes for them, it's kind of just flicking that switch of, sometimes it is completely more psychological. It's their routine. And they know if they're doing those things, sitting in Normatec leg compressions, five evenings a week, to them, they've kind of ticked that box. And that kind of just settles them psychologically, mentally, and physically.
Nice. So we've talked a lot about kind of elite performers, but are there any kind of lesser known hacks that we can apply for like ourselves that are highly effective for recovery?
Can I add something here? Nature immersion. So just going out for a walk, being in nature, being amongst trees, that's a cool way to just calm the nervous system down. So that's something I kind of prescribe to my athletes, tell them to do. Then another thing is social recovery. So a lot of us here have partners, have friends. So that's another way to recover. I wouldn't say it's still one of the boring stuff that people tend not to focus on, but it's one way that you can actually recover.
That's really interesting about the nature point. I saw there was an April Fool's meme, I think it was Yahoo, about touch grass, and they've made an AI version of touch grass. It's like just showing the digital age that we live in. So yeah, really interesting. And what about the role of mobility in active recovery? How important is that?
Yeah, super important. Again, I think that's something that everyone can do. Most days it's finding time, accessing time, looking at mobility, depending on the type of mobility that you're training or doing. It can have kind of real short-term benefits. So it is just really compounding that. If you can do that little and often for longevity, then it's a really important thing. It's not something that we can kind of just dip in and out of. So I think finding routine and consistency is really key for that. And again, that is going to change person to person around family life, job, occupation, lifestyle. But yeah, I think kind of just adding in little routines and allowing that just to compound over time, and that helps increase that longevity.
Yeah, similar to Sam, when it comes to mobility and active recovery, is kind of having small little tasks. So if it's going to be like a post-run mobility session, if you are going to do active recovery, what does that look like for you? So it's kind of being deliberate. And I think, as you said, Jess, elite athletes are deliberate in everything that they do. And we as normal people, we also need to be deliberate when it comes to recovery. So a little often goes a long way.
Yeah, that definitely resonates. I think whenever I have physio exercises, at the beginning I'm really good and really consistent. Over time, it just becomes a bit harder to commit to. So it's having those things that you can commit to that are like consistent, that you can show up and do each day. Definitely. Cool. So now we're going to talk a bit about the mental side of recovery. So Jess, what techniques help you strengthen your mindset and stress better, manage your stress better?
So first of all, when it comes to stress, it's not just mindset. We do have to think of the physical stressors. And when we're training at high levels, we've got to factor in things like our gut microbiome and the impact that that has on our hormones and on our nervous system. So when it comes to a mindset thing, it's making sure that you celebrate the small wins. Celebrate when you pushed yourself to get up that hour early to go out and do that 5K or 2K or whatever. Gratitude has such a profound impact on your dopamine levels and that reward pathway. And when we're dealing with high physical stress and it increases things like our cortisol hormone, which is a stress hormone, it can lower our dopamine. And then that can be the first signal around that lack of reward, that lack of motivation. Am I pushing too much? Is it impacting my dopamine levels? So celebrating those small wins, things like gratitude journaling, that can really help to boost your dopamine and just help with mindset and stress and resilience.
Nice. Do you guys have any other sort of tips for mindset and managing that mental stress when it comes to performance as well?
Also, one thing I do prescribe or allow my athletes to find comfort in is that visualization. So for elite athletes, we know that they're highly, some of them strong, but they really want to tap into that flow state. So how do they do that? So some visualization techniques like looking at the race map, picturing and knowing what you're going to do. So when it gets to 30K, I'm not looking for like 5 different gels. I know that my drinks table is going to be here. So it's like visualizing the race days before. So it's that proper preparation that will support your kind of mental approach to it.
Nice. Yeah, I saw something the other day that was like the things that are in your control that you have influence over, and the things that you can't control, and you list them all out, and then you write the if-thens. So like, if the weather's bad, I'll wear a hat. You know, like I can have an influence on it, but I can't change the weather. So it just allows you to kind of feel less stressed about certain situations. But yeah, I don't know if there's anything else you want to add on that, Sam, or?
It's pretty much mirroring what the guys have said. I think visualization and some of those kind of like mental tips and tricks that we can do, that can be all the way from elite athlete down to, to kind of like grassroots, young children, visualization, preparation before an event. If you've never run a marathon before, half marathon or 5K, whatever it might be, there's things that you can put in place to prepare yourself for that environment before you start. I alluded to knowing the route, such a simple thing, but you're not going to get to 36K and then see like a slight increase, and then all of a sudden, you're spiking everywhere. So I think, any little things that you can do, writing down times, paces on your arm, all of those little things, the better that you can prepare. Self-talk, give yourself that confidence. It goes a real long way in just kind of making yourself feel a little bit more comfortable on competition day, or even through training, or just going out yourself on a Sunday morning.
Nice, great. And what are some signs that we need to watch out for when it shows that we aren't recovering well? Are there any other sort of signs and things that might indicate that we need to work on recovery more? Maybe starting with Jess.
So I'm just going to talk about pain a little bit. So I talk a lot with my clients about resilience, building resilience, and I talk about this hormesis, this hormetic region that we want to stay in. So hormesis is all about challenging yourself enough where you benefit and you grow and you become more resilient, but you don't want to go too beyond your threshold where you're in that oxidative damage, that cellular breakdown, the pain. And if you're constantly in that pain, or you're getting more fatigued for longer, you're starting to notice other things like emotional exhaustion, that lack of reward, I would look at, okay, are you going beyond your threshold? And look at if you've got a coach or if you've got some form of schedule. Factor in other things in your life as well. Is work more demanding at the moment? How are my relationships? Children, if you're a parent, kind of factor in all those things as well when you're looking at, I call it your stress bucket, okay? So I would look at fatigue, if you're getting fatigued longer, if the pain is lasting longer, if you're starting to notice getting these little injuries, these niggling pain, just pull back a bit and reassess your stress bucket and look at your training and just come back to, do I need longer recovery? Am I pushing beyond my hormetic region, beyond my threshold? And we'll go into it in a moment, but there's a lot you can do from a nutrition perspective by looking at things like antioxidants, like really flooding yourself with like antioxidants, polyphenols. These are all found in our foods. And with some of my athletes, I do kind of supplement some kind of higher dose of antioxidant just to help with that cellular repair. So they're the things that I would look out for, not just the physical, but also emotional exhaustion, lack of reward, those types of symptoms as well.
Yeah, I totally agree. Also, the body never lies to you, right? The body is so smart; it knows, it can predict. Like you said, when it comes to like knowing that you're overtraining, and maybe mood changes will happen, and maybe diet changes, nutrition changes, and maybe performance starts to decline as well. So like your body starts giving you these little whispers, like, "Hey, I'm not feeling good." Then it starts to shout. It starts to shout in the form of injuries. Then like that impacts everything. So you need to really listen to the body. I know that's a cliche term, but your body starts to give you those signs every so often. So yeah, please pay attention to your body.
I just want to add to that, what we don't often see with these professional athletes, we see the highlights. We see when they're performing well. We see when they're winning. But do you ever notice some of them maybe just drop off and then we don't see much about what's going on? Those could have stepped into, they've now got a serious ailment. A lot of them can develop autoimmune conditions. And my husband is a big fan of like triathletes, Lucy Charles-Barkley, I think, Sam Leglow. They're all dealing with, injuries, and I think Lucy Charles-Barkley got diagnosed with an autoimmune condition. You can just be pushing too much, going beyond that threshold, because that's what the oxidative damage can lead to. And this has kind of come back where our gut health is so important, so important. So if you are training for a marathon, if you're training for a triathlon, you're cycling, that endurance sport can weaken your gut barrier, your gut lining. So kind of coming back to a question that you answered before, what's a little kind of tweak that we don't know much about, that's not really spoken about? I speak a lot about, has anyone heard of colostrum or taken colostrum before for your gut barrier? I do it a lot with my kind of working athletes that are training heavy for an endurance sport or a marathon, because it can weaken the gut lining. Taking things like colostrum after training can get in and really repair that gut lining so it's not so weak and permeable, and strengthen it, because that's where 70% of our immune system is in the gut. So just wanted to add that.
No, yeah, super interesting. I think the point about those little signs, like I know I'm feeling stressed and then I get a cold sore and then my heart rate variability is off the chart, and then you're like, okay, and then you get ill. So it all kind of builds up, doesn't it? But you can spot those early warning signs, I think. Does anyone else want to add anything to that point?
I just had one more just small thing. We all wear measurables, Apple Watch, Garmin, Whoops, Oura rings. Sometimes again it is like drop that ego. I think we kind of like live by these, to the extreme. I alluded to it a little bit as well, like go off like how you feel, it's your body. The more you do, you know when you're not feeling quite right. So sometimes it is, dropping the ego and allowing yourself just to take a step back, have an extra rest day, lower the intensity or the volume of your training, again, depending on what you're doing week to week. But not just kind of like sticking to these measurables.
Especially for us women, that's very important if we want to keep our cycle. Okay, just throwing that out there.
Yeah, definitely guilty of being a slave to the plan or to the watch sometimes, and you just need to like listen to yourself and be like, should I be doing this today, or do I need a day a bit chill, a bit more relaxed? Yeah, that's a really good point. And do you think we should approach recovery differently depending on if we're doing like endurance sports or more kind of higher intense short bursts of exercise? So how does that vary? Maybe, yeah, I do you want to start?
Yeah, definitely. I think when it comes to endurance, which I'm a bit more focused on, you probably need a longer recovery, extended recovery. If you have done a marathon, it's gradual return back to running. So then you have to also think about the musculoskeletal part of recovery as well. Like you exerted so much in that marathon, in that race. So you need to give yourself a longer period of time. When it comes to like high rocks and sprints, I'm sure Sam can talk a bit more about that, but that also focuses on that kind of neuromuscular. Then you also have to think about the central nervous system. So there's different type of recovery depending on the output.
Yeah, I think training for high rocks, which is obviously a lot more accessible kind of to everyone, especially at the moment in the last couple of years, it's a lot more explosive, and you're basically just looking to work at like a higher output for kind of between 60 to 90 minutes or so. So the recovery changes, training for high rocks, there's a lot more cross training involved. So again, depending on what you've done coming up to that point, you are going to have a little spell of adaptation through the body. So recovery might need to be kind of like upped and a little bit more frequent through like a high rocks block. Then moving into more endurance, it's something that, the planned training for an endurance event will be over a longer period of time. And you can really like knuckle down with the basics a lot more. Your mileage is going to obviously be a lot higher through a marathon block. So sleep, hydration, and kind of rest days are going to be a lot more important. Training for high rocks or sprints or more explosive movements, you're not going to need like so much of that. It's going to be a lot more week to week, making sure that you're hitting kind of like recovery goals. A nice way to do that sometimes, I love like soft tissue work. I respond really, really well to that. Sometimes pick 3 or 4 things that you like to do in terms of recovery: ice baths, compression, massage, and literally kind of grade them from like highest to lowest. If you can pick 5 modalities, have your favorite or what you respond to best as like 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and then give yourself like a little target per week. You need to hit 12 points each week from whatever recovery modality you want to do or feel best through the week. Of course, as we start like moving up through the levels, professional and elite, then that's going to become a lot more tailored to that individual or that sport. But for general population, for you guys and I, it's a nice way just to make sure that you're kind of hitting enough recovery through each week.
Good.
Yeah, nice. It's interesting thinking about like high intensity versus more endurance, because I think, if you run a marathon, you're like, yeah, cool, I'll take 5 days off or something, but racing a 10K, sometimes the next day you're back running again. It almost feels like it's not treated the same as it maybe it should be in terms of that recovery piece. So trying to find the things that work for you, I guess. Yeah. And as athletes, we tend to push through discomfort, but how do you know the difference between sort of pushing smart and then overtraining?
Now, what Sam's saying, just kind of to add a little bit to that, not saying there's anything against ice baths when it comes to women and female. We do have to separate the genders when it comes to recovery, and when we're doing endurance training and we're building up, like either whether it's high rocks or training for a marathon. Us women, we do have to work with our cycles. We do have to work with our hormones as well. And then if we're kind of jumping into an ice bath then post-recovery, it can just stress the system even more when it comes to, because women, we rely so much on our adrenals. Our adrenals are what push out hormones, make things like testosterone, help to make estrogen, and that's so important. So I just want to add, if you're a woman in the room and you're trying to push yourself through doing an ice bath and you're really struggling with it and you're actually more stressed getting into the ice bath, don't do it. Then it's counterproductive. If you're stressed in the ice bath, don't do it, okay? Because it's just going to increase those hormones, and it is kind of counterproductive. Now, it's coming back to resilience and that hormetic threshold I was talking about, whereas you do want to do enough to kind of challenge yourself to kind of get the benefits. So you're already training at potentially a higher level. So give yourself longer doing that, and then kind of separating, if ice bath is something that you do really want to get into, just take it down, like really, really pace yourself with it. It could be just getting in for like 30 seconds until you feel that like really intense stress and feeling really uncomfortable. If you get to that point, don't spend too long in there, get back out, and then maybe wait a while and then test yourself again. I just think it's very important for kind of women to understand that in regards to kind of the impact that the stress that has on our hormones. Sorry, can you ask the next question again?
No, that's okay. That's super interesting. It was kind of in line with the question, which was how do you know the difference between pushing smart versus overtraining? So
okay, well actually that answered it. Yeah.
Find your own boundary.
Find your boundary. Yeah, I always say to my clients, if your recovery is stressing you out more than the actual training itself, then it's counterproductive.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, similar. Sometimes you're going to know, if you go out and do your long run at the weekend and you find that your recovery just seems a lot longer or a lot more uncomfortable than 3 weeks prior to that, then yeah, potentially, you may have overtrained. You might be then kind of pushing into a pain barrier. That is obviously going to be different person to person and their tolerance to that exercise as well. So yeah, very individual. Listening to the body again for pain over discomfort.
Yeah, that makes sense. Did you have anything else?
No, nothing from me.
Okay, nice. I guess I have my own personal example, which is I've got a bit of a tendon injury at the moment, so it's a constant am I pushing this smart or am I overtraining? Do I feel pain the next day or have I done too much? But I don't know if you have anything to add about tendons, but it seems to be quite hard to know what to do in that sense.
Yeah, again, it's, our tendons need to be loaded. We are very hot on, we've got a tendon issue, then let's load. I think it's important to have that initial phase of we do want to lower the pain and then gradually progress. I think it's really important to find therapists, whether it's sports therapist, physiotherapist, whoever you are working with, just your coach, S&C coach, that it's someone that you really trust. You have that really good kind of boundary and connection as well. I think that can go a long way at just that kind of rehabilitation process. Again, it has to go person to person. But yeah, I think, yes, we know that scientifically we do need to load our tendons to improve and strengthen. But we must be honest with ourselves and we must kind of drop that pain threshold before we kind of move to the next stage of that. So that's really important.
Sure, I've got a question for you, Sam. What does preventative recovery play in this? With the tendon issues, sometimes it can just happen out of nowhere. What can athletes do to prevent tendons? Is it strength or is it additional recovery? What are modalities they can put in place to support tendon issues?
Yeah, again, it's a very holistic approach. Part of sport is injury.
Yep.
It is going to happen inevitably at some point. Yes, with tendons, especially for runners, lower limb, kind of Achilles, soleus, calf complex, it is something that we really undertrain. We take a lot of load through our Achilles tendon, 8 to 10 times body weight and force every time, we plant that foot down. So what does that tell us? That it takes a bit of a battering, but also it's super, super strong. So it's really important to train it that way as well. So again, there's no kind of markers that we can set, do this 3 times a week at this weight, and you will never get a tendon issue to the Achilles. If you're doing the right things, you're going to minimise the risk and frequency of injuries. But yeah, I think kind of, everyone would be stupid to say that we can kind of completely rule that out. So yeah, doing the right things well and often, and those boring things, repetition and consistency, and use that period of injury, to kind of swivel, focus on something else, and yet turn an injury into a positive as well, which again, pretty cliche, but it is an important bit of advice.
Yeah, that's a really good point, and it kind of leads me on to my next question, which is how do you balance recovery with progress? And I think I definitely found this when I'm trying to recover. My mind gets a bit we should be moving, we should be doing something, we always need to be busy. But actually, is there some techniques we can use to get that balance and to feel the benefits of recovery? Jess, did you want to comment on that?
I can understand why your mum is saying you're burning the candle at both ends. So that's very, very important to recognize and have that awareness if that's where your thoughts are going, because that can lead to burnout. So coming back to those early symptoms that I mentioned, if you're starting to notice that emotional exhaustion, that lack of reward, that derealization, these are the early warning signs of burnout. And come back to your stress bucket. Don't just think of exercise, yes, is absolutely fantastic, but if your stress bucket is really full with other things going on in your life, then you just got to kind of check in with yourself and just say, okay, where can I pull back a little bit? But remember what I said at the beginning, factor that in as part of the work. Don't see it as a setback. Look at it as strengthening your resilience, because as Aya was saying, you got to listen to your body when it's whispering before it shouts, because I see the people whose bodies are shouting, and trust me, you don't want to be there, because it takes so much longer to come back, because then you really have to stop the exercise that you're doing and that you love, or you have to some people have to get signed off work because they're chronically fatigued and burnt out, and that is harder to come back from. So listen to your body when it's whispering. If your mind is saying, I need to keep doing, I need to keep going, I need to keep going, check in with yourself and say, why is my brain thinking that I need to keep going? And then factor the recovery in as part of the work.
I agree. Just to come back on that point as well, I don't think you can balance it. As you said, I think recovery is part of the process. And if you're in the process, we know this, we've heard it, process promotes progress. So if recovery is not part of your process, then you're missing the trick already. Then we know that recovery is where the magic happens, is how the body adapts from the stimulus. So yeah, recovery, I don't believe you can balance it. I think it has to have a fundamental part in your training, whether you're training for Couch to 5K or marathons, it has to be there.
People can get addicted to adrenaline. I'm just saying, if you're that person who's addicted to adrenaline, really check in yourself.
Nice, thanks. And how can we measure recovery? What are the metrics that we should be listening to potentially if we are wearing watches and wearables, or are there other ways that we can measure recovery?
So I say to a lot of my clients, I only wear my wearable really to look at my heart rate variability, and yes, my sleep. But I just want to see my heart rate variability, and I just want to see the things that I'm doing. I'm really aware of the things that I'm doing that double my heart rate variability, and I do more of those things. And sometimes my heart rate variability increases when, let's say, I'm in a community like this. I'm, sharing knowledge, I'm feeling good because I'm helping others. That increases my heart rate variability. If I'm around, if I'm socializing with close friends, if I'm doing kind of mindfulness, deep breathing, sometimes watching my favorite show, that increases my heart rate variability because it's when I'm in the calm state. So when your heart rate variability increases, that's where the magic happens. That's where the repair happens. That's where the recovery happens. If you're in a high stress state or that addicted to adrenaline, you're probably struggling to get your heart rate variability up because you're constantly burning the candle. Okay. Now, what I do with some of my clients then as well is I test their cortisol, cortisone, their DHEA. I look at their parasympathetic nervous system and I look at their sympathetic nervous system, their circadian rhythm, to actually see how it's their diurnal rhythm, how they're mounting a cortisol response. Are they mounting a DHEA, which is that rest and digest, that heal and repair? Again, that's where a lot of the magic happens. When I see clients' DHEA levels low, that's a clear sign of long-term chronic stress. And DHEA is how our immune system copes. And it's the people who get the cold sores, who gets the infections, whose immune system is quite compromised, their DHEA levels are low. And then their cortisol, what happens is, I say it's like you're pressing on the accelerator with the handbrake up. What's going to happen? Your engine's going to conk. Okay? We don't want to get to the conk, because trust me, the conk's not fun. Okay? When you're feeling that, if you're addicted to adrenaline, just pull back ever so slightly. Check your heart rate variability. Look at when it's high. Do more of those things when it's high. I'm sure everyone in this room who's tracking their heart rate variability sees the impacts of alcohol, poor nutrition, dehydration, poor sleep, that all lowers your heart rate variability. So why do those things often if you're trying to train? Because we need that heart rate variability on our side, because that's where all the recovery happens.
I'm quite. Oh.
You're back.
Yeah, I'm a bit old school when it comes to this. I really look out for the body cues, really listening to my body. For my watch, I just wait for running. I don't use any other tools to track anything. Like, I know when something's going wrong, but that's because perhaps I've been running for a while, been in the game for a bit. But I think like really trusting your body, nothing can really beat it there. But again, younger, up and coming athletes tend to trust the devices, but I believe that these devices should describe rather than prescribe. Like if a watch is telling you to recover, then yeah, we're heading down that artificial intelligence world. So yeah, please listen to your body.
That's an interesting point. I think, there's a lot of metrics on watches now about, your score, like how recovered you are, or like how your training's going, predicted race times. Like, do you have a view on that? And sort of how we're being a bit more data-led now, maybe?
Yeah, I think data has a part to play in sports, elite or amateur. I think, but it should help us. It should describe what we're doing. These markers are sometimes right, but I just believe that like if you're training well, you're doing the basics, you'll start to see the results. But yeah, these watches just describe what you're doing, and you'll start to see some anomalies, things aren't right. Then you've got some actual scientific back data coupled with how you're feeling, and then it's all about just adapting and tweaking things here and there. But I don't think it should be your sole usage point. Like, you should just use your body as well. Perhaps if you're working with a coach or therapist, like, use your network. Like, no athlete is one, right? Is all, like, I believe that athletes should use everything that they have.
Yeah, that makes sense. Great, so we've got 10 minutes left. We're going to do one sort of last real-world takeaways round, and then we're going to hand it over to the floor for questions. So have a little think about anything you might want to ask. But just to close out, so final question for each of you. If someone wanted to upgrade their recovery routine tomorrow, what one thing should they start doing? So I'll have one from each of you. Anyone want to go first?
Yeah, I'll go first. Sleep. Sleep well. Fix your sleep hygiene. I once read that sleep is the best performance enhancing drug that no one knows about. And to this day, I still live by that. Like, yes, sleep well, focus on how you sleep. One thing I do is I nap. I'm a ferocious napper. I was napping on the way to get here. just 5 minutes on the train, just shut my brain down. Yeah, maybe it's unique. It's unique to me, but yeah, napping also helps as well. There's science behind this, but yeah, sleep is the biggest takeaway for me.
I'm so glad you said sleep, because I was really struggling to pick one. I was like, which one is going to take? Because like sleep is so critical. We have this incredible powerhouse in our cells called the mitochondria, and the mitochondria produce ATP, which is energy. Okay, that's how we produce energy. Sleep is where what's called mitophagy happens. Mitophagy is where the mitochondria grow, and that only happens when we're asleep. So it helps to clear out the kind of damaged mitochondria so they regenerate, and that happens in your sleep. Now, I just wanted, before I kind of give my one key takeaway, is there anyone in the room that just every night wakes up at 3 o'clock? Yeah, 3 a.m. night waker. A lot of ladies, a lot of ladies in the room. So this coming back to the cortisol hormone I was talking about. So our stress hormone, if you're pushing on the accelerator, okay, you're pushing out, you could have too much cortisol at night, okay, and what can happen is we can go hypoglycemic in the night. Then liver kicks in to try regulate the glucose in your blood, so it'll push out glycogen from the liver. Do you ever wake then just feeling so alert and anxious almost that you feel like you have to get up and clean the house almost? Well, yeah, that can be because your liver has pushed out that glycogen to try regulate your blood sugars in the night. So come back to kind of how you're eating throughout the day. So that's going to be my key takeaway, I'm going to have to say, is make sure you refuel correctly, okay? Don't try not skip meals after training. If you've just done a heavy session, make sure you refuel quickly or conveniently that is appropriate to you, what you need as an individual, okay? So depending on what training you're doing, kind of calculate the protein that you should have. I generally say kind of 1 gram to 1.2 grams per kg of body weight of protein. So calculate how much that is kind of in your day, and maybe aim for about 30, 35 to 40 grams of that, depending after, so you refuel. But don't be afraid of carbohydrates, please, especially the women in the room, don't be afraid of carbohydrates. We really need our glucose and our carbohydrates to refuel, because this is how women lose our cycles, okay? We're not fueling appropriately, especially when we're in a particular stage of our cycle, right before we bleed. Sorry, men in the room now, I'm just going to spend a little bit of time on this because I see it way too often with my women, is especially if you're training in that time before you bleed, that's where your body needs extra fuel, okay? And if you're endurance training and you're not fueling correctly, or you're trying to be low carb and higher protein, you're not giving your body the right resources. So this is where symptoms can happen of PMS before you bleed, and this is then where you lose some extra fuel and nutrients when you bleed. Then you get into this vicious cycle of being really fatigued and really impact your mood and your stress hormones. You're waking at 3 a.m. in the night. So really identify those things, because it's coming back to blood sugar dysregulation. Not getting enough of the protein, fat and carbohydrate, that balance in your meal, and refueling correctly. I'm going to stop there because I could really go on about this for another hour.
Great. So
Any questions?
Sleep and food. Sam, what's your...
Keep mine super short. So just find something that works for you. We compare to everyone. I've got 2 young kids. I have to train super early or I won't fit it in. If you do 10 minutes of some form of recovery, a stretch, a foam roll, whatever it might be, and it's only 10 minutes a day, it's over an hour a week, month by month, that's another 4 hours, correct maths. 4 hours that you've suddenly done that you may just not have done at all. So it does slowly and gradually kind of compound, but it has to fit your lifestyle, and it has to be something that you can stick to each day. So yeah, keep it simple, little and often.
Great. Well, thank you so much for our panelists today. That's actually all we've got time for. So if everyone could give us a round of applause.